Hi, Daniel. I didn't think that was any shade. It does. I think it does explain a lot. But I appreciate Amber getting in the mix too.
Yeah.
Marinella, in
Terrible.
close to midnight. In the shadows is Marinella. Oh, Trisha's giving us a unique view of the sky. Cloudy. Allison, Jennifer.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry. Hi.
Wonderful to see you. We've got two Italians in the room. I can feel it. All
Who's the other one?
the high fashion energy floating around.
Exactly, the high fashion.
I'm not sure about fashion on my end.
Especially at this time, it's super high.
Hello, Sandra. Hello, well, Allison. No, not yet. I'm just hold on. Just texting with Mario to get him in the mix here. Huh. Hold on. No. Okay, hold on. What's the Zoom link here? Hey, Amber.
You want me to shoot it over to him? I'll do it.
Okay. Yeah. That's weird. How's everyone doing? Hi, Ginny. Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Nato.
I love everyone on the mobile phone, like out and about in the world. Feels very energetic.
Cheers.
Cheers. I'm Maria Markham.
Hi, Maria.
Hey guys, how you doing? Good to see you all.
Hi, Josh.
Marinella.
Missing you a lot, Maria.
Oh, I keep meaning to ping you. How is your course going? I wish I could take it.
Super
Again.
beautiful, but you are missed. Ciao, Mario.
Mario. Oh, he moved around. Mario. 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 Oh, you're muted. Unmute. We still can't hear you.
Okay, ready? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Okay, here I am.
Welcome. Welcome to the Alternative Art School on Zoom. I know you're familiar with it on Smash Cut. It's such a delight to have you back. I'll do a little intro and then you can take it away. I know you said to me, no conversation. I want to just show some slides and do a talk, for God's sake.
Yeah, yeah. Gotta let people know what the hell I do. They don't know what the hell I do.
I'm with you, bro. So we're gonna get right into the mix. Welcome, Mario Ybarra Jr., incredible artist based in Los Angeles, who's been with us from the very beginning. And we are so excited to have you as a visiting artist and be teaching next semester with us. It's so important. You've gone through a harrowing COVID era journey. Caught COVID while teaching at the school, no less, and then has slowly but surely rebounded. I don't know if you still got your crutch kicking it.
Yeah, I still have to use a cane.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm going to have a lot more energy. I'm ready to roll.
All right. All right. Well, listen, our hearts are with you. We're glad to have you back. Just last week, we had Tanya Bergera, who also, as you know, had a crazy winter experience where she was kidnapped, interrogated 3 times.
Oh, man.
So it's just, our instructors are getting put through the ringer. And
Yeah, we are.
to put it mildly. And it's also, art is a team sport. You know it better than anybody else.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, I will turn it over to you. And just for the record, we're going to do about 45 minutes of talk, and then we'll do some questions. Got it?
Sounds like a plan. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's edition of the Alternative Art School Artist Presentations, Artist Talks. So what I was planning to do is, because I've been teaching, we taught a couple of rounds, and I usually give my artist presentation during the term. But one of the things that I really wanted to celebrate and kind of share with you, and I get a lot of questions about, is Slanguage Studio. We started Slanguage Studio, believe it or not, next year will be 20 years. It's like, I almost want to cry when I think about like how many years can go by so fast. But I wanted to share with you this presentation because a lot of students are always asking me about like what we do at Slanguage and how we started and how we make things run there. So I wanted to share that with you a little bit today. So let me get into this slideshow here. Okay, Slanguage Studio. What's all this crap? Launch meeting. No, we don't need that. Can you guys see? Can you see my presentation, Nato? Or is it there?
Yes, I can. I can.
Okay, let me go into a slideshow and go into whatever, full screen or whatever. So can you all see it? All right, so you can see the images. I just want to make sure that everybody could see before I start talking. All right, so hey, from Italy is here. Italy's in the house. Milano's in the house. Pleasure to see you. But so what happened is now 20 years ago, my wife, Carla, and I were going to be getting out of grad school along with some other friends, and we really needed space to work. One of the big concerns about being an artist, of course, is that you need space to work, right? Like, it's really important to have a space to work, a space to talk, a space to make things, and a place where you feel you can make a mess, like make a mess, and nobody's going to come and be like, hey, clean this up, and all this kind of stuff. You need a messy space. And one of those things when you're in a graduate school or in college, you've got these spaces or you have to invent these spaces. And part of what we've been doing at the Alternative Art School, and kind of COVID has really taught us this lesson, is that how do we create our own spaces for making art, right? But first you make a mess and then you make art. It kind of goes in that order. It doesn't usually happen that you make art out of then make a mess. It usually happens that you make a mess and then somehow or other that turns into art. And this was in 2002, and our friends and I were like thinking about like what that space would look like. We even took out a sheet of cardboard. Like, I'm always like heavy into making notes. We even took out like a sheet of cardboard, I remember, and like with the black Sharpie marker, like laid out a floor plan, and we were like, this will be like my studio space, this will be your studio space, we'll have like a commons area, et cetera, et cetera. And we were like, well, where can this place be? And I think our fingerprints and our nose prints must have been like on every storefront throughout Los Angeles we saw for rent sign. Like, we were like sticking our noses and our hands on it, like looking inside, and like, oh no, this ain't gonna work, right? This won't fit our floor plan. This won't fit our floor plan. But we eventually, I saw this storefront here that I'm showing you, 640 Avalon Boulevard, which is in the heart of the neighborhood I grew up in here in LA, Wilmington, which is the port of Los Angeles. And I was like, I saw it, and it was my friend's building. And I called him and I was like, hey, like, I see that you have this storefront for rent. Is there any way that we could, check it out? And he was like, well, I'm showing a client the space this afternoon. If you want to join us, you could go ahead. Like, if I wasn't a real client, right? Like, I just was like a tag along. But my friend, he's like a big brother character to me. So he's kind of always, my whole life, he's been letting me tag along. So anyways, I show up at the space. There was a person there, but they were looking for kind of office space. And the old Slanguage Studio, the original Slanguage Studio, used to be a bakery. So I could tell in their face they weren't interested in it. They needed something that looked a little bit more officey. And plus, the inside of this place was painted like shit brown. It wasn't very officey. It looked like, I don't know, like you're inside of a big caca, right? And we were like, oh man, like, I was like, I could see the vision, right? Part of being an artist is that you have the vision. And that vision can, as we all know, can be our blessing and our curse, right? Like, but we have to go for it. We got to go for our vision. And I saw that this could be turned into a small studio space / all those little things we had written down on our cardboard sheet. And so I kept bugging my friend every day. Like I was calling him, did those people rent it? Did those people rent it? Did those people rent it? And finally, I guess I wore him down because I remember it was on a Friday, August 15th, 2002, that the dog days of summer. And he was like, you know what, just come get the key. Like he was sick of having me call him every day. I guess the other potential clients weren't interested in renting the space. He's like, just come get the key. And he was, I'm going to give it to you for this amount of money, which was super cheap. And he said, but if anything happens, if you need to replace the toilet, if you need to fix a window, he's like, don't call me. I'm giving you for this cheap, but you're going to have to fix anything and clean up the place. And I was like, well, that's fine with me. And luckily, at that moment, I was able to sell my first artwork. My friend was also able to sell his first artwork. I was able to sell one to the Irene and Peter Norton Foundation or collection. And my friend was able to sell a piece to the Altoids collection. And we had a little bit of money so we could like pay the first month and deposit and all this kind of stuff. And so we rented the place. And our initial intent was for it to be our studio, right? For us to like make things and do stuff there. But you could see this is like a little storefront on the street there. I would be in there working. I think we had like the windows covered up with paper or something. And I'd be there working and I would hear like knocks on the door, right? And I'd be like, whoa, like who's out there? Like who knows I'm here? And I would peek out and I would see that it would be a bunch of young artists from the neighborhood. They were kind of young adults, about 18 to 25 years old. They would have been in college in any other circumstance, but they weren't going to go to college. Most of them were kind of graffiti kids and kind of punk rock kids that were kind of anti-establishment anyway. And they're like, Mario, they knew me from the neighborhood. They're like, Mario, what are you doing in there? We heard you're making art in there. And so I would let them in and they'd be like, well, what are you doing? And I'd be like, oh, I'm drawing over here. They're like, oh, we would like to draw too. I'd be like, well, here's paper, go to that corner, like, don't bother me. And then they would come in another day like, oh, what are you doing? And I'd be like, oh, I'm trying to like fix this airbrush or something. And they would be like, oh, I want an airbrush too. And I'd be like, okay, well, get the compressor, go to that corner and do whatever. Just like kind of do whatever you want to do. But slowly and surely, they started telling their friends, and all of these young artists started coming into the studio. I was only about 27 at the time, so they weren't too much younger than me. They're maybe like 3 or 4 years, 5 years younger than me. And so the studio slowly, these young people, these young artists, there was an urgency to have a space because in the community that I grew up in, there wasn't really much art spaces. It's more industrialized with the harbor and oil refineries and stuff like that. And for myself, I had to go to like the next town over if I wanted to do anything to do with art, like I grew up going to this center in Long Beach called Homeland. So there wasn't really much in terms of like arts and culture here in the community. So all these young artists started showing up. And it was really kind of fun to we had no budget. We had no money. I remember one time the water and power people came and somebody left the back door open and we couldn't pay the bill and they came and shut off the lights. And thank God we had these big windows in front because we started doing workshops and things in the front window during the daytime. Come nighttime, we didn't even have the money to pay the bill. So it was all about kind of DIY or do it yourself attitude and using what we have and kind of having like a ball. And we facilitated a lot of the ideas that these young artists would come in the door with. And some of them wanted to start painting the front window. Others of them wanted to start doing like DJ workshops. And it was a really fun period of time because for about 2 years, I really focused on just facilitating the space. Like my job was to kind of show up in the morning, open the door, make sure that whatever throw up or human feces or trash, got piled up in the front, clean it up, water it down and get ready for a new day. and these young people would come in and be like, oh, Mario, we want to do a DJ workshop. I'm like, well, do you guys have turntables? They're like, yeah, can we do it on Wednesday? I'd be like, sure, I'll be here, I'll open the door. There were a group of young women that wanted to have kind of talks, right? Discussions. And they were about 18 at the time. And I was like wondering, like, who are these kids gonna bring? Like, who do they have as a network? And remember, this is like 2002. So it's still kind of like chat room age internet, or like maybe MySpace. It wasn't to the social networks that we have today, right? It's a little bit different. So I was wondering, like, who do they have access to? And sure enough, they said, oh, we have 10 people lined up. We want to do it every Thursday at 5 o'clock. And I was like, okay, if you bring the people, like I'll put out the chairs. And they had some of the really most interesting discussions that still stay with me. I remember there was a young man, so this was about 2003 by now, and there was a young man they brought in that just had gone to federal prison for 2 years under the Homeland Security Act because he had a website called raiseafist.com, which was a politically organized website where it was kind of a bulletin board where people could post. Now everybody posts on Instagram or wherever when a protest is going to happen, or things like that are going to happen, and people know where to show up and how to do it. Even today, there's posts like when we were going through all the George Floyd protests about like what to take to a protest, right? Like, they write the phone number on their arm and water and hat and what to tell and not tell the police if they arrest you. All that information is pretty circulated, and you could get all that information. But this young man had this bulletin board website, but somebody, not him, but another person had posted a link to that website on something, how to build a pipe bomb, I believe, from like the anarchist cookbook or something like that. And he was then charged with federal charges under the Homeland Security Act on distributing information to build a weapon of mass destruction. And he was only 18 years old, and that kid came to speak to us. So they were bringing in a lot of interesting people. So the young people had this kind of urgency for an art space, a cultural space, a discussion space. And I was lucky enough to facilitate it. And I'm always saying, like, one of my mottos is to facilitate, not player hate, which means that if somebody's coming to you with an idea, like, how do you facilitate that? How can you help them? How can you get them resources, et cetera, not player hate or try to stop them or block them from doing what they need to do. And that's what our mentors, my wife Carla and I's mentors, kind of taught us. And that's the kind of practice that they kind of launched us into as young artists. I remember going to the Homeland Cultural Center I just talked about in Long Beach, and I would be kind of just in passing telling the director, her name was Dixie Swift, oh, I want to teach a workshop in this and this and this. And by the next week, she had like a group of youth, and I was making a zine, and she figured out how to budget it and all this stuff with us. And so like throw them directly into the sharks and help facilitate. And if you can do that, I think that's one of the things that we've been trying to build distinctly here at the TAAS is like, how do we facilitate one another as a community? Like if somebody comes in with an idea, we're trying to plug you into a global network of resources and people that can get this done. So that's kind of the attitude that this space language was developing at the beginning. And I'm really lucky, like I get to work with curators and historians and all these different types of folks because, I went to school at Otis College of Art and Design here in Los Angeles. Then I went to graduate school at the University of California, Irvine, which was a very kind of interesting time to be there because that's when Derrida was there, and our faculty was like a really kind of interesting mix of kind of first wave feminist writers and theorists, and they try to really create a model of diversity with the different professors and all this kind of idea about the culture wars and race theory and the cyborg and all this stuff. It was a very theoretical based school. So I was very fortunate to go through this program, both of those programs. So my teachers and people that were, my mentors were very great at facilitating. And since we were just out of school, and we had the space, they were always interested in bringing different people to come visit us. And so that was other artists, curators, etc. But I remember too, back to that plan on the sheet of cardboard that I told you about when we first thinking about the space. I remember we wrote on the list, these lists on the sides of the floor plan that we had made for ourselves. And we were thinking like, well, what do we want to do? Like, oh, we want to make relationships with other artists. We want to make relationships with curators, with institutions. We want to be able to become like bridge makers between communities and institutions, et cetera. Like we had like all these like 5-year plan kind of chunky ideas in relationship to like what we wanted to do. And so we had that, we had a vision for that. We didn't exactly know how that was going to happen, but we did have resources and we did have people that would kind of slowly be sending us people. And I remember like during those first 2 years of just my practice, just shifting over to facilitating the space, I remember curators or folks would come over and they would see things on the walls, right? Like right here on this window, we have a painting by one of the artists that worked with us. His name is Mario Dread, DJ Dread Lopez, and he wanted to paint the window for the parade that happens. And he painted some b-boys and some other kind of cultural icon things on the window. And my job as facilitator was to like, okay, make sure he had paint, the space, the windows were cleaned, etc. But people would come visit me and they'd like say, for example, they'd point at Mario's painting. They'd be like, hey, is that your painting? And I'd be like, oh no, that's Mario's painting. He's one of the artists that kind of worked with us. He's one of our studio artists. And they would, they'd make a face and then they'd go inside and there'd be something else happening in there. And they'd be like, well, are you working on this? And I'd have to be like, oh no, that's this other artist. His name is Eric, and he's trying to draw like every Ozzy Osbourne album cover ever, right? And on and on. And then they would kind of become befuddled and they would look at me and they'd be like, well, Mario, like, what are you working on? Like, what are you working on if none of this stuff on the walls is what you're working on? And I'd have to explain to them, you're breathing in it, right? You're breathing in it. You're breathing in what I'm creating, what I'm facilitating, how I'm trying to help create community and advance the kind of places and spaces that the artists that are coming to us with a real urgency can use. So you're breathing in it became like a kind of tagline for this space and what my artwork was, because like I'm saying, people would really get confused because their idea of art was something that would be hanging on the wall or put on a pedestal or painted as a mural or whatever, a video, photos, whatever, right? And I had to even shift my perspective that was my practice, that it wasn't something that I was just like, oh, I'm switching gears from this to this and doing this, and oh, this is something that I do separately from my practice, and my practice is this thing over here. No, they're integrated, right? They were integrated into one another. So to me, it was a total legit response when I would tell them, you're breathing in it. Okay, so one of the things that happened and developed over the time we were doing Slanguage was that we started to seeing that the artists working with us needed somewhere to take those skill sets or places to share those skill sets. So we decided that we would transform the first generation of artists that were working with us into kind of artist teachers in the space. And then those artist teachers were starting to then teach like teenagers and youth and kids and families and all that in our space. And what we're looking at now is one of the things that we were also trying to gear towards the needs of the artists that we were working with, because they were specific, right? And they needed to figure out how to make money. So we were trying to develop kind of applicable skill sets for them to put into kind of a craft or a trade. And one of the things was that we brought in a kind of professional custom sneaker guy. His name was Rod Levedko, and he gave us a workshop on how to customize sneakers. He essentially now is like a sneaker cobbler. He repairs like Air Jordan sneakers, so vintage Air Jordan sneakers where the soles go bad. Like just if you had a pair of boots or dress shoes, you would take them to the shoe repair and they put on new soles. But Ron does that for sneakers. So it's really interesting. So we brought him in and kind of started doing workshops where like some of the people, the artists that we work with, like that's an applicable money-making skill set that they could use in the community, because folks always want things customized, their football teams or whatever, right? So that was really kind of integrated in what we wanted to do. One of the other kind of interesting facts about the community I grew up in is that it's a union community, being that it's here in the harbor. And so like really understanding like how to generate, labor and how to generate craft was really integral to us, because like, how do we get folks to, not to downsize art, because art is very important, but like, how do we get that out and about and on people's feeds or on, in ways where they can commission artists to stay active and keep themselves being involved as an artist and creative, as opposed to just only thinking about that they had to get another job or a day job, quote unquote, right? Like, so that was really important to us, kind of these skill set building workshops. And then we were also very much interested, we weren't interested, actually, I'm lying. Like we weren't interested in doing kind of youth and children's programming. That wasn't like our first intentionality. The first intentionality altogether was just to have a space for us to work. And then over time, like the "you're breathing in it" syndrome kicked in, and facilitating space for other folks to work was also very integral, became like integral and dubbed into that intentionality. And then workshops like this would happen. But then we partnered with the city of Los Angeles to develop programs. Oops, I went way too far. Workshops. Okay. Oops, next. Okay. Into developing other types of things. And one of the other things that we were really interested in seeing in terms of like professional development for the artist core that we work with was bringing in art professionals. And we developed a program called You Got to See It to Be It, where we would bring in art professionals at all kinds of levels, be it museum curators, art writers, other artists. And this photograph here is of a young breakdancing crew here in the neighborhood. They're called Dub City Tribe. And my wife is there in the middle here, that's Carla. And she heard that these kids had been breakdancing on one of the main street corners, and they were getting ticketed for loitering and kind of doing performances without permits. And this kind of incited her. She was furious. So she went and adopted these kids and allowed them to break dance in the back room of our studio. So like every once a week, these kids were coming to break dancing in our space, the Dub City Tribe. So this is the Dub City Tribe, like all these kids. There's me without a beard. But this man next to me here in the photograph is not part of Dub City Tribe, right? Who that is Gunnar Kevnar, who was the former director of the Astrup Fearnley Museum in Oslo, Norway, which is one of the major collectors of US American art in the world outside of the US. So we've been able to work with him and Hans Olbrist and a few other folks on different projects around the world. So he would come and visit us in the studio, and it was always great to have somebody like Gunnar come and hang out with the Dub City Tribe, right? And of course, hang out with us. And he was always so gracious in imparting his knowledge. And these are, he's just one of the folks that we would bring in. So, like we're doing an artist talk today, and I'm coming to impart kind of some wisdom or knowledge or whatever it is, understanding with y'all. Gunnar would come and like hang out with the kids. And it wasn't so much that he did a presentation like this one, but he would just talk, and we would ask him questions. How did he get to do what his job is? How did he get there? Da, 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 da. And You Got to See It became like a very important role modeling program within Language's overarching program. And it's still something that we do today, with some of the young apprentice artists. We have them bring in folks and go meet folks and see them in their setting, or they come see us in our setting, which is really important. You got to see it to be it is also one of the things that where I feel like I'm in line with what we do here at the Alternative Art School. Like we're bringing to you some of the most challenging artists in their fields and in the areas of and in their areas of the world to come and speak to you weekly for our classes. And you got to see it to be it. It's very difficult if you don't have a model to set your kind of vision on. Remember earlier I was talking to you about our vision as artists can sometimes be a blessing and a curse. But if you don't have a model, a person that has been able to achieve those things or avoid those things or whatever it is that you might have a line of questioning about in the field of art, and it's really important for us to be able to see it to be it, or else we feel like we're creating it from scratch. And I remember my grandmother telling me before she passed away that we were very fortunate, that I was very fortunate with my generation, because I'm now second generation immigrant from an immigrant family from Mexico here in the United States. And she said, I was very fortunate to have my uncles and aunts here living in the United States, because with my parents' generation, they didn't have uncles and aunts living in here in the US. So they couldn't ask because their aunts and uncles were back in Mexico. So when problems occurred or things occurred, they didn't have nobody to ask. So setting a model is really important, and to be able to come to artists, especially some of the artists that we have here with us, is super, super integral and very much a leg up. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm able to share with you. And yeah, so you got to see it to be it. Then youth programming. Over the years, our first intent was to work with these, young adults and kind of help them grow into their practices and into whatever kind of field within art or around art, because it's not just the artist as individual. There's this kind of industry built around art. And that means that there's museum people and support people and even people that make art crates and all these kinds of jobs, this industry that's created around art. We tend to just focus on artists, but there is this kind of, even somebody that frames pictures is really integral to like the whole art picture. And my niece told me that the other day. She called it the art industry. And I was like, really? Like, what? It kind of broke my heart. But it's true. There is a kind of art industry and infrastructure, right? And so that was our first intent. I was explaining to you. Then we started developing with those artists to be artist teachers, other types of programs. So we started working on what we called this Language Teen Arts Council. In 2008, we were able to visit the ICA Boston, my wife Carla and I, and we were able to be kind of artists in their first artists, kind of working collaboratively with their first national teen art councils convening. It took place at the ICA, and there were the teen arts councils from the Whitney, the Walker, et cetera, et cetera. And we were like, oh, this is kind of cool to be able to have the youth come in and help develop programming for other youth. So we decided to make one at our studio, which is a Language Teen Arts Council. And they met weekly, and they had two of our artists were kind of the facilitators of that, Emilio Venegas and Antonio de Jesus Lopez. And they did all kinds of things. They did things in the community. They did things like zine making. They did a flea market. They did all these things that they were trying to interface, what we did at Slanguage with the community. And here we could see a couple of their workshops and some of the things that they were doing. Other things that they did is we brought in artist in residence to work with the teens. Like this is Sarita Doherty, and she took this kind of 1 meter by 1 meter square kind of dirt plot in front of the studio and turned it into a very kind of small micro garden. But she worked with the teens and their teen leaders to use that and to plant things and kind of start getting a taste for what that might be like in an urban environment, and kind of dealing with kind of eco arts. Like I have a black thumb personally. Like I'm afraid to touch a plant, but like the kids got the chance with this 1 meter plot to do things. And you'll see on the window there's another artist painted, Armando Cortez, painted an image there, more of like a Kandinsky-esque abstraction. But yeah, like really trying to bring in artists to interface with the community, to interface with the youth, unlike with what we had. Like I said, that DIY spirit of utilizing the resources that we had at hand and doing the best with them. It's like, use what you have, do your best. That's kind of a motto that I've always been going for. And it doesn't mean that to start, I need like a whole plot, like a farm. Like to start, we just needed that square. Then that led to other projects. Like, this was a kind of an abandoned parkway in the city. It was like a kind of just abandoned, like it was a trash dump. People would dump their trash in an old sofa there, sofas and stuff there. And I was kept asking artists when they would come visit if they wanted to lead a workshop with our teams to kind of take over the park and turn it into like a kind of art park. And they did. They planted things, they repainted things, they made it into like a fun kind of. It was kind of reminding me of a little hippie park, it wasn't that big of a space, but it was really more like a traffic median that had a couple park benches in it. But to be able to do that and to kind of spread ourselves out into spaces that weren't necessarily like permitted or bought, and it was more of like a kind of takeover of sorts of spaces. And that's why I'm saying, like, use what you have and do your best. Like if it's something that you need to take over, it's really important just to do that. People are always asking me about, well, how do you get permission to do that? Who do you got to ask to do that? And my grandmother, she had a very wise saying that I've always kept, which is sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, right? Sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness and permission. And in these cases, that's what we did. We just went and took over spaces. Like nobody permitted me. Nobody said I could do this. Nobody gave me the blessing that I could do it. You just like find a self-initiating motivator, find people that were interested in collaborating with you and make things happen, right? And that's like something like this little project, even though it's small in scale, it had a powerful impact. Yeah, so we worked with the teens, and then we started a program pretty much around the same time. And it's interesting, I get a kick out of this photograph because most of these kids now are in their 20s. Some of them, like this kid at the far right here with the green shirt, Theo Veliz, he's up at UC Santa Cruz in the film studies program. And some of these kids, like this bigger, I don't know what I did, but this bigger kid here, Vincent, he's like already starting his family and stuff. So it's very interesting to see, and I don't know how to get that square back up, but anyways, and they were programs where they were drawing. There were programs here where we brought in this guy, James Rojas, who is an urban planner and working with the kids to develop kind of what they would want to see in kind of urban settings in the community. Oof, I don't know what I did. Okay, anyways, I don't know if you guys could see this little tiny thing right here, but I think I went into moving around stuff in PowerPoint, but anyways, I'm almost done with this so we could take on questions. But at a certain point in around 2008, we had started sending all of these kids off to college, and they were coming home right in the high point of the financial crisis. And any other time with a degree from schools like Berkeley, stuff like that, they would have left the community here and went and found jobs in other places around the country. But they were all kind of designated to come back home. So we were incubating them. We've got to work with them on their art collectives. There was this one here in black, what's called AYAS, which was a young feminist women's group. We also worked with a group called We Can, which was what is it called? The Wilmington something and culture initiative. They were doing things in the community. So we got to incubate these young people. Several of them gone on to be like in city politics. Other of them have gone on to work in the museum field. Some of them became artists. A lot of them became teachers. So it was interesting to see like how when something shifts or kind of culture shifts, like we keep a kind of pirate ship mentality enough to be able to shift with those things, that our rigidity is not so solid, like this is who we work with. But again, like when people come to us with different needs and we're able to facilitate those different needs as opposed to being such a rigid structure that it's hard to change, right? I remember Raul Vasquez, I think who you'll see in another one of these slides. Yeah, Raul, one time we were working and he said, he kind of gave us our mission statement where he said, I could have been a patriot, but I chose to be a pirate. I thought that was so funny. I could have been a patriot, but I chose to be a pirate. And I thought, oh, wow, what an awesome mission statement. Like, how do you survive in a kind of small scale, hook and crook, get things done by the seat of your pants, DIY? It's much more interesting than like a kind of hyper intellectualized vernacular that you would read in other artist statements. And I've sat on a lot of review panels for different people, and when I read either artist statements or mission statements, I see that they seem just to borrow and cut and paste from all this different jargon that is floating around in the world. But to be a pirate is pretty essential, you know what I mean? It's kind of like Robin Hoodie, right? Like you rob from the rich and give to the poor, and it's kind of straightforward, and it's less complicated. This was inside. You'll see like how we had displayed things up. A lot of the things that you would see on the wall here were things that, you know, students had made in workshops, etc. Then this other projects where we started interfacing with museums. This is where Carla and I don't know if I'm even still with y'all. Hopefully I'm still with y'all. Where Carla and I worked with the Serpentine Museum in London to develop a kind of bird watching club, and we worked with created a model here at Slanguage here in Los Angeles, took that over to London and developed a kind of social practice project where we developed a bird watching club and kind of heightened the awareness of the students in terms of what we're seeing in visual culture in a big city like London. We were part of the Made in LA biennial in Los Angeles, where we took over a nonprofit art space called LAX Art. This is the same instance where we're taking the kind of model that we created with Language and started bridging that into institutions like museums. Here's one that we did at MoCA. Again, there's that Dub City crew breakdancing in the plaza at MoCA. This was a performative thing that Carla did, and this was Raul Spuvesquez, the guy that said I could have been a patriot, but I chose to be a pirate. Them doing a kind of performance piece there at MoCA. Yeah, so that's gonna wrap up what we do at Slanguage and all the various types of ways that we put things together, take things apart, and work with different folks. So I wanted to open it up to questions now, because we're wrapping up our 45 minutes for my talk, and I wanted to hear what you guys think.
Well, thanks, Mario. Boy, you are not only timely, but ever overflowing with energy. And you just tried to sum up 20 years in 40 minutes. That's about
2 minutes
year every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But please, everyone, they also, just so you know, obviously people also can use the chat to ask questions too, or just chime in or raise your hand or whatever you want to do. Maybe I can just kick it off. Sure. I was struck by your kind of deep understanding of social relationships as a form of pedagogy. Mm-hmm. And that it's not just something that you're taught through learning, but it's a social experience, and the importance of mixing race, class, gender, sexuality, but also being choreographed about it. Yeah. Having spaces that are smaller for younger folks, where people find comfort, getting them out of their comfort zone. These are not things that are taught through a book, but more about bodies and space. How did you come to learn that?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. I think I got to learn that from having great mentors, Nato. Like I said, I grew up going to this center in Long Beach called Homeland Cultural Center. And my mentor, Dixie, she always used to make sure that we understood that people that are educated, like with schools and stuff, are not better or more valued than folks that are educated in a kind of like school of hard knocks or within familiar experiences and all that. And I remember every time I used to think, like, I would come with a big word and I'm like, oh, we're going to teach a workshop, and I would say some kind of art word. She would always check me, like, she's like, I'm glad you know that, but we're going to be working with all kinds of people in your workshop. Like, that area of Long Beach is super hyper populated, but it's kind of like an intersection of a neighborhood. And she was like, you don't know who's going to come to your workshop. You might have like a 7-year-old African-American boy, an 80-year-old Cambodian woman. They're just going to be coming to your workshop. So if you start throwing out all that stuff, you better either make sure you have a kind of explanation for it, or you just make everybody feel comfortable. And they would just lead by example that way. And the same way they would do that to me as a young person, when I wanted to teach things or do things, they always made sure that I facilitated things, and they were always taking me to spaces too that I remember being uncomfortable. I make my first time at Mocha or something. I was like an opening act poetry reader for one of our other mentors. I was like, they put me out there, okay, you're gonna read at Mocha. I'm like, what's Mocha? And then they take us there, and there was like all these grown people, and I was like 19, and I read my poem, and then a couple of other group people from the workshop read their poems. And then our mentor would be like the headliner. And then we'd be like, oh, okay, this is what Mocha is. They're cool. Like they came up to me after and shook my hand and stuff. So I guess it was modeled for me. That's why the you got to see it to be it part is super integral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone want to chime in? I mean, Mario just lays, as ever, puts his entire soul on the line 24 hours a day. It's not easy being such a generous, emotional person, Mario.
It's not, man. But it's only way out. Carla, like, she always tries to put like a board, like frames around me. She's like, okay, I had to go install a few weeks ago at Arizona. She's like, okay, Mario, like, don't do anything extra. Like, you don't have to talk to the janitor. You don't have to you don't have to hang out with all the kids. And I was like, yeah, but when it's game time, I just like, it's funny. I just hear the bell, like ding, 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 and it's like it starts,
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah, well, you're not too dissimilar, Nato.
It's just that you got your way of being, and it just kind of that's how it is. Anybody else want to ask a question or a thought or a comment?
I have a few questions. First of all, I want to say hello, Mario. Do you remember?
Hi. Yes.
Hola.
How are you? Yeah,
I'm okay. I love your grandmother's, saying about it's better to what is it to be forgiven. Can you say it
ask
again?
for forgiveness. No, sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness
Then for permission. I love
yes,
that.
there you go. There you go.
I have 3 questions. One of them is like, I love the little space that, like that public space that you created. Is it still there? Does it still exist? What happened?
Yeah, that's one of the things like I wanted to talk about with the class I'll be teaching next year is that as artists, we like to point out things. So like the class is called from painter to pointer. So like as artists, we point out things like people don't pay attention. They don't care. They don't have the time for it. Like that little park, it's getting all the trash on there. And here in Los Angeles, like, the people throw their sofa, they throw the refrigerator, all that stuff. And then once an artist comes, they'll be like, oh, this is actually a cool space. We need to use this space. And now the city has put a fence around it and it became a dog park. So now it's a dog park. So I was like, well, at least that's better. People can use it. Now it has a function, like it's not just for trash, but people could take their doggies and they could take them in there and run around and play. So it still has use for people. And then the neighborhood, we don't have a dog park. So I was like, okay, that's an okay median. So now it's a dog park.
Okay, it's interesting. So it's like for artist dogs or something like that. Like artist dogs that love art or something.
Yes.
So another question, I have 2 questions. Well, the next one is like how, what does the name's language mean to you? I know there's a whole history behind that.
Yeah, so one comes from kind of popular culture. Like there was a famous movie Blade Runner, and there was a famous Chicano actor in Blade Runner who is Edward James Olmos, who is like he's like the quintessential Chicano actor, Mexican-American actor. He's every Mexican-American role for 40 years, he was the actor. And he's in Blade Runner. And he plays this detective that he could like, there's a very interesting scene where Harrison Ford is eating like noodles on the street. And then Edward James Olmos' character walks up to him and he starts speaking this language of the future. And the film Blade Runner is set in 2019. And he's speaking this language of the future, which is they describe as a street language, which is of Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, German. It has like all, it's kind of an Esperanto language that they say will be speaking in Los Angeles in the future. So in 2002, we thought, oh, like the people that were starting it were like, oh, we're Mexican American. By 2019, we should be able to speak this language, So it's 2021 now. I could say a few words in other languages, but I can't carry a whole conversation in 4 languages at once. And that was one idea. The other idea was that we were just coming out of graduate school where we had to read all of this saussure and sign and signifier and all these kind of things. So we were like, oh, it's kind of like a sign language, right? We were playing on all this theory we were learning. And the other thing was just, it sounded cool. If that could be an answer, like it sounded cool.
Mhm. Great, that's so cool. So my third question, if nobody else has questions, I don't know if I should go.
Go ahead, Cloudy, just jump in.
It is like I'm diving in now.
Okay.
But that's a very difficult question, and I'm not sure if I can phrase it well.
Uh-huh.
It's a delicate question about Los Angeles and community making and being Latino and Chicano.
Yeah.
So how do you, I don't know, I really love the way that you were able to create this community environment with language, with, you know, to create the air you breathe, right?
You're breathing in it. Yeah, you're breathing.
Yeah, I really love that. But I think there's also, I see like a very Chicano Latino kind of energy that goes into it, an environment. And how do you insert, you know, inject that in LA that I thought it was a very disconnected place for, you know, an outsider like me?
Mm. Yeah, it's
How do you, I don't know, I come away with all those questions now, you know, like how do you create that space? I mean, I know there's that Latino influence. I mean, you know, that I don't know how to phrase it without not being politically
let me
correct.
try to, let's take one, because it's kind of 2 parts, that question, right?
Yeah.
Like one is like, how as a kind of like a Latino in Los Angeles, how did we evolve that space or create the space? And then the second part was more how as a kind of outsider into a space like that, like Los Angeles, can you somehow participate in that kind of space, or also be in tandem partnership with it? Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I don't know. It's in my mind.
Okay, well, I think the first part is kind of interesting because I always say that Los Angeles is a bit like the Planet of the Apes for Latinos, because it's where Latinos run the culture, right? It's like such a, specifically Mexican Americans, was we've been here for so long. So like if you think of the Planet of the Apes, or the apes run culture, it's like kind of like how Mexican Americans are. It's like everything seems to be inverted, but in a brown way here in Los Angeles. But the other thing about that in terms of, so I think that that's kind of, for me, growing up in that culture, it's got just kind of second nature. And it's also just very, I know that there's people could say different things about it, but I think for me, it's also very inclusive, because I grew up in an area where like my grandmother, like I was telling about my uncles, that they didn't have other uncles, my uncles didn't have family and stuff that lived here in the US. So their friends were all types of shapes and sizes and colors, and they were all at my grandmother's house. And what I've learned about my grandmother, and maybe this, it's gonna sound bad, but maybe it's like, I found out that she was a genius person at being a person that told little white lies to make people stick together. Because when she passed away, all of my aunts and uncles, they all went their different ways. And I wondered, like, why we all love each other? Why didn't we stick together? And then my aunt came back she lives in Oregon. She came back and she told a kind of white lie. And that made everybody go back together. And I'll tell you what she did. She called each and every one of us and invited us to dinner. But the way she made it sound was that we were just personally going to have a dinner with her. And when we got there, our whole entire family was there. And I was like, wait a minute, like she gave us a white lie. She wasn't lying. She was inviting us to dinner, but she didn't say that everybody else was coming. So once we got there, we had to like settle in. We kind of all found our spot. Well, I found my spot. I was like, I didn't want to sit by my uncles because I didn't want to hear their opinion. So I went and sat with all the younger crowd, my nieces and nephews and cousins, so they could hear my opinion. But I don't know. It is about a kind of navigation, a navigation that is complicated, but I think it's also very much a culture that is inclusive. I don't know if that helps your question or not, but I don't know. I've been starting to believe more in the little like fibs to make things happen. I told you it's about asking forgiveness, not permission.
Well, listen, thank you, Claudia, for asking such great questions. Thank you, Mario, for being so dynamic. It's so great to always be with you. We're looking forward to having you next semester. By the way, folks, please do sign up for his course when we release these things in October. And Mario, thank you for just being such a generous human. And, you know, you do often stick around to talk to the janitor, but the janitor's dope. And
I learned a lot from the janitor, shit.
You're awesome. And Language Studio, for all those that don't know, we'll send some stuff around about Language Studio, about Mario's practice. It's as complex and as robust as his personality is, which is saying a lot. And he's done a lot with his partner, Carla. And we're excited to have you back. And thanks everybody for being here with us on this Visiting Artist Talk.
All right, stay creative and stay in communication, y'all. Peace.
Peace. Right on, guys. Bye.
Bye.